Welcome to the Troy Kearns podcast, where we talk all things real estate, business, and entrepreneurship. Today, I'm with my good friends, Ryan Greenberg and Nick Kalfas. So happy to have you guys on. I know this was something that we planned out for a while, and it just took us a little bit of time to actually get this thing together. I've been buried. I know you guys have been busy. I'm really excited to be talking to you guys today. I've got a lot of questions that I want to ask you. Specifically, can you guys tell us who you are, what you're about? Nick, do you want to go first, or Ryan, do you want to go first?
Nick could go first.
I can go first. So I basically started buy and hold investing in 2018, right around April 2018. Right now, I'm currently at 58 units, and I'm just looking to grow my rental portfolio. I don't focus on flips. Like I mentioned before the show, I think I've done maybe 2 flips. Although I do extensive rehabs to all of my rental properties, I just tend to keep them, and I look at the long-term picture and goal, and that is to build that long-term wealth over time versus getting just a large check at once.
So Nick, where are you guys from?
I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I was born and raised here. All of my investment properties are in Baltimore, either Baltimore County or Baltimore City.
Right on. Ryan?
So my name's Ryan Greenberg. I started investing in about 2016. My real job, I guess you'd call it, was a PE teacher. I got with a partner back in 2017, actually had raised some money through an angel investor, I guess you would say. And we started buying real estate together, started buying some tenant occupied properties, and then moved into doing some more of the BRRRR strategy. And since then, now we've built this property management company around it, general contracting. We have a Maryland home builder's license. So we're doing some new construction stuff. So we're kind of like A to Z real estate investing. For people out of the state, for people here, we're like a one-stop shop.
You know, since we kind of first hooked up, I started following you guys. One thing that I really was impressed with is you guys do like a ton of construction, like not just like your average flipper where you're going in there and you're cleaning it up and you're putting it back together. You guys like do knock down, drag out, reframe. Talk to me about that a little bit.
So, Nick and I are investing in Baltimore City. It's a really, really old city. So a lot of the stuff that we're getting is, 100, 150-year-old homes that if you're not doing a big construction project, you're going to ask for so many maintenance problems. We talked, I think the first time about like cast iron pipes and things like that, like old stuff that you just really need to replace. And if you don't, Nick and I learned the hard way where those service calls would just kill you in our game. Both of us kind of like doing that extensive rehab and getting as much equity back as possible so then we can successfully pull most of our money back out.
There's 2 huge benefits of, doing a renovation, when you're buying and holding the property. Obviously, one is to make sure everything's new. That way it'll last, 10, 15 years before you have to replace any of the big stuff like maybe a roof or a water heater or the HVAC system. And then another thing is when you buy a property low, and you do the BRRRR method, you force the appreciation by doing the renovations to where, a perfect BRRRR would be you able to either cash out when you go to refinance or at least just leave $0 in that deal and have a cash flowing asset.
Tell me, what was the first property that each of you guys bought? Because you guys own a lot of real estate right now. And I know that like a lot of people who are listening to us right now may not own anything and they're trying to get inspired. So can we talk about those first properties that you guys owned?
Yeah. So I guess I'll go first. Like I said, I got with a partner. I bought my first property that I lived in and I started renting out rooms. They call it house hacking. I was basically living for free. And then I said, oh, wow, this is really nice. Started getting into Bigger Pockets and different podcasts and forums and stuff like that. And kind of got addicted to the words passive income. That's when I was actually a boat captain in the summertime, a teacher during the school year. And I raised $500,000 from a guy at the dock that had a boat next to the one that I was working on, and basically found a partner and started buying at first tenant occupied places because we didn't really know about the construction process. And then soon switched over to buying properties that we had to do a bunch of construction on to kind of get that equity piece.
Nick, were you there the whole time?
So we should probably say why Nick and I are here together, because we are not business partners. Last year, started talking about, he was doing a YouTube channel that he was starting, and I was doing some financial literacy teaching, just educating in the schools that I was teaching in and other student athlete groups and stuff like that. I saw Nick doing the thing on YouTube. We're both in the same network. So we knew who each other were. We were both 2 30-year-old, got a bunch of real estate and do business in Baltimore. here. Everybody knows everybody. So I reached out to Nick to start this podcast, and we had the pleasure of having you on, a couple episodes ago. And it's called the Everyday Millionaire Show. And we basically talk about everything from basic investing to stories Nick and I have had about our investing to business and everything in between.
You guys are partners in the podcast, not into any deals.
Yeah, just in a podcast. And to talk a little bit about my first deal, I purchased April 20th, 2018. I didn't know much about real estate investing. Quite frankly, I didn't even know what hard money was. And I just put the word out there. I thought about how the life cycle is like. You wake up, you go to work, you come home, go to bed, and do the same thing over and over again until you're 60. You hardly have any money to retire on, or even if you do, you can't really enjoy yourself once you get, really, really old. Not to say that 60 is old, but just like in general, you may have, issues along the way. So I'm like, I have to find a way to make money while I'm not working, like not physically working. And I thought about real estate investing, and I'm like, I need to buy a rental property. I put the word out there to my friends, my family, and just anyone I knew. And then a buddy of mine calls me. He's like, hey, this buddy has a landscaping business. I also have a landscaping business. He has one in Dundalk, Maryland, out of Dundalk. And he called me one day. He's like, I'm doing landscaping for this lady who just inherited 3 or 4 properties. And I'm like, cool. Let me get her number. I'll give her a call. By the time I called her, she was down to her last property. I met her at the property. Before I met her, I reached out to a realtor friend of mine. I was like, hey, I'm getting ready to go look at this property to potentially buy. Can you send me like a off-market contract that I could use? He sent it to me. I brought it there with me, came to an agreement. I signed the contract there. It was for $52,000. I had $30,000 in the bank. So in my head, I only needed $22,000 just to complete the transaction. And then I would just do the rehab over time. So I reached out to so many different people, 4 or 5 different hard money lenders. It got denied 4 or 5 different times. Finally reached out to a lender who decided to lend to me. His biggest qualification was he needed to see $30,000 in the bank. I sent him my last 2 months bank statements, and the most recent showed that I had $30,000, and he lent to me. So he met me at the property. He's like, how much do you need? I said, I need $22,000 just to, complete the deal. He's like, what about the construction? I'm like, I'll just fix it up as I make money over time. He's like, well, we can do a construction loan also. And I'm like, what? You guys can do that? And I had no idea what it was. So he explained it to me. He's like, we'll lend 90% of the purchase price, 100% of the construction loan. And then I purchased that property. I was in another dilemma. I didn't know anything about construction. So I had to reach out to another group of people, ask them about contractors. And I finally found a couple of different contractors, some of which didn't work out. Finally got the house done. And then the last step would be to refinance it. I didn't know if I was able to refinance it, but luckily a local bank was able to refinance it, and I was able to pay the lender back. And I just kept doing that from there.
So can we dive a little bit, Nick, into those details? Okay. So I know you told us that the house was like $52,000 acquisition or something like that around.
Yeah. So it's $52,000. I think I got a construction loan for, I think it was $35,000 or $40,000. I think with closing costs and everything, I was all into the property about 110, appraised for 160. So I was able to get 75% of $160,000 loan when I went to refinance it with the long-term bank.
Nice. And what is that property renting for? Do you still own that property, and what's it renting for?
That property is now renting for $1,500 a month.
Nice. So your debt service on it's probably like $600 or $700 right now.
So basically my first 5 properties, I refinanced when rates went really low over the last year. And obviously, most recently they've gone high, but I refinanced that property along with, another 4 that I had with the local bank with a broker that I used to do a 30-year fixed loan. Whereas the local banks, they were only doing 5-year ARMs, amortized over 20 years. Because I've owned these properties for a few years, I was able to refinance out at a lower interest rate. They went from 5.9 to 4.25, and I was able to cash out and still keep my mortgage payment the same, which was pretty cool. I think the mortgage is like $800 or $900.
I guarantee when you first started, you knew what it was. And now as you're scaling, you're like, I don't know. I know I'm making money.
You just got to look at the spreadsheet when you got to figure that out. You got to look at rent rolls.
It's a good problem to have. And, one thing I really like about you guys is I've seen this a lot more on Ryan. Ryan likes to take a lot of vacations. It looks like he likes to travel a lot and enjoy your life. I think you guys both tend to enjoy your life a lot. Talk to me about that. Is that kind of why the reason that you guys got into this is to, get out of the rat race, so to speak, and be able to have your time back?
Yeah, I think like the freedom of being able, and I say freedom, but when I'm on vacation, the phone doesn't stop ringing, the emails don't stop coming. So yeah, I've traveled, I went to Costa Rica this year, Grenada this year, but the whole entire time I'm there, I'm taking phone calls, I'm FaceTiming with contractors to make sure that things are getting put in the right place. We're still very much connected even when we are traveling, but I am definitely into traveling. I think, the freedom of being able to work from anywhere, as long as your team is strong. I think I have to say that like twice, like your team needs to be strong on the ground. And once you have that piece, you can really go, anywhere you want and have things operating. I will say going to different time zones is hard. That's one thing that I haven't figured out yet, because you're working at crazy times and people are calling you at crazy hours, but Yeah,
I think sometimes you just got to literally shut the phone off and say like, let's see how it goes when I'm not here. I always tell people there's no emergencies in real estate. It's like the only emergency that we ever have is one that we create. Right. And we get this like whole sense that, I got to do this. I'm a worker. I got to answer my phone. Like I'm going to Belize on Friday. My plan is just, I'm not answering my phone. Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's see what happens. And that's how you figure out how strong your team is, as you mentioned, Ryan, right? Like, is my team strong? Yeah. Let's see if I don't answer my phone, how strong they are.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I'm trying to learn. I know Nick is starting to get some employees and stuff in place, but, after a certain time when my administrator is off, those calls come to me. So when there is a flooded basement or there is a leak coming from the ceiling or whatever it is, a busted pipe, those, I have to figure out, I guess, as I scale, who's going to be the one to take those calls, because when those calls come in, I need to call that contractor, whoever it is, it's going to go fix it right away. So I know there's like call services and different things. So I am testing out those waters now as we scale the amount of properties we're managing.
You guys being pretty new and scaling pretty quickly, both of you. By the way, Nick, you got an amazing accent. I think your accent is top tier. In terms of, like, if you want to represent Baltimore correctly, I mean, I think Nick's got it going on. I'm not telling you yours isn't great, Ryan, but Nick has definitely got that East Coast, like, seventh generation East Coaster or something like that. How long
I'm from New York. I'm not even from Baltimore.
Where are you from in New York?
Long Island originally.
My wife is from Glen Cove. Long Island.
Oh, really? Yeah. So I'm from like Ronkonkoma area in Long Island. Yeah.
Can you say that 5 times real fast?
Nope.
So Nick, are you from Baltimore?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Baltimore County.
Nice. Okay. You mentioned earlier when we were talking that all your deals are in Baltimore and all your deals are in Baltimore County. And you say that with pride. Is that something because like when anybody's listening to us out right now, like kind of the connotation of Baltimore is like the same connotation that you have with Detroit. Can you talk to us about that? Like what's going on in Baltimore right now?
So definitely Baltimore City is a little difficult to deal with when it comes to, pulling permits, getting inspectors out. A lot of times they call out. I'm doing 2 projects right now in a neighborhood called Pigtown, and it's been a month just trying to get the HVAC inspector out there, the plumbing inspector out there. And it's to the point to where like, you just don't even want to pull permits. It's like, if you're doing work on your own stuff, you can get away with it here and there. But obviously if you're working, we don't do any work for anyone else besides doing work for the properties that I own. But it's just like, it's ridiculous the time that they make you wait, and then they don't reschedule until the day of, and then they'll reschedule a week out. And this happened a few times recently. Taxes are a little bit higher in Baltimore City than they are in Baltimore County. Also, Baltimore City is very particular about driving around. And if a tenant has any type of loose trash, or if you're doing a rehab and they see construction debris, they're very quick to give you a fine or give you a citation or a warning. But, they're not super quick about doing anything else when it comes to benefiting the property owner. That's where I grew up in Baltimore County. How you were mentioning about Detroit, like I live in Baltimore County and it's right next to Baltimore City. So in my eyes, it's not that bad. You do hear about the news and how there's shootings, but I feel like that can happen anywhere. I was down in St. Petersburg a few months ago, in downtown St. Petersburg, eating at the end of the night with one of my buddies, and we hear a gunshot. The car that was parked literally 15 feet away from us had a convertible top, and some guy just shot him and killed him right there. So crime can happen anywhere. And
there's pockets too. Like, a lot of the news, they only really focus on a very small piece of Baltimore. Some of the townhomes that I'm renting out to 25-year-old professionals at Johns Hopkins are worth $500,000+ there are areas that are going to be really dangerous that you wouldn't want to go to. But then there's beautiful areas on the harbor or close to the harbor with trendy bars and restaurants and stuff. So, the stuff that you're going to hear on the news about Baltimore is definitely really terrible. What they don't tell you on the news is that there's properties here for $20,000 that you can put, $50,000, $60,000 into and cash flow like crazy with very, very minimal cash.
Yeah. And that's how the news gets their ratings. They have to show you the worst of the worst. So that's going to be like that anywhere.
You brought up a good point. I want to dive a little bit deeper in. We talked about permits, right? And I think that's an interesting point that you really eloquently put out there, is that like, you're going to go through all this trouble to do things the right way, and they'll blow you off. They spend all this time, they make it cumbersome for you. I just went through a very similar situation on a property that I did not pull permits on, and then I got a stop work order. And then you go back through the process and, you're delayed 3 months just because they don't want to do anything. People always ask me, they're like, do you pull permits and everything? And I always say, absolutely. But the reality is, when you're working on your own properties, sometimes it's not the best use of time or energy to pull permits, because you're alerting the devil, in my opinion, sometimes, of a potential problem. You're inviting someone into your house that their whole goal is to fine you, delay you, and cause you problems and not try to help you. And it's funny because a lot of these places like Baltimore, they get a bad reputation because the areas are run down. But you also mentioned that, like, you can have a piece of trash debris and they're hyper-focused on finding landlords, but they're super unfocused on helping tenants with getting new properties by making the process easy for people who are developing properties.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some short-sightedness with Baltimore City and what they're doing, as far as like, they're quick to send us a $30 citation for, a trash can lid that's not on there. But like, I'm having the same issue getting a plumbing contractor out. A plumbing inspector. I've been waiting literally a month. They've canceled 3 times. I can't close up the walls. I can't get my framing inspection until this is done. They've held this up, cost us thousands of dollars in interest and holding costs and all these other things that we don't want to be paying, that they don't care. They don't care that we're putting in millions of dollars into the city, redeveloping dozens and dozens of homes per year. They really just don't, they don't really see us as an asset, it seems like.
I think you guys need to get involved with the city council over there and figure out who's elected and strip some of those regulations back off. The problem is, when you become an investor, it's like nobody wants to get involved in politics. But the reality is, the people who want to get involved in politics are the ones who want to like write you all the fines and stuff. And that's who's there, like, the hall monitor, right? They're the ones that are like, they don't understand business. They don't understand the fact that you guys just put millions of dollars into the city and investing it, and that you're getting delayed and costing thousands of dollars. And if they weren't doing that, you guys could renovate more properties, make Baltimore way more busy, way more better. And the fact is, the same situation happened to me actually the other day. I got literally a property I bought in St. Joe that was a fire damaged property that I literally put like, I'll get to it whenever I'm going to get to it. And I happened to get another property that I'm in contract to sell, where it had a carriage house on the back side of it that I didn't touch. I fixed up the main house. I said, I'm not touching that other piece of crap. Let the owner, whoever buys it from me, if they want to touch it, they can. And then we got a notice said, you must demolish this in 24 hours. I'm like, demolishing a building in 24 hours is not an easy feat. So I did it. I don't pull a permit because I didn't have time to pull a permit, because they sent it to me on a Friday and it needed to be done by Monday. And then they call me up. They're like, you didn't pull a permit. And I'm like, you guys.
You told me I had to demolish it.
You told me I had to demolish it. And now you're telling me I need to get a permit to demolish it when I can't get a permit when you guys are closed on the weekend and it's got to be done by Monday. They're policing the wrong way. I feel like if smart guys like you got involved with finding out who's actually doing the leadership and strip some of those regulations back, there'd be a lot of good things happening in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm. Who wants to be in politics, though? That just seems like a losing battle.
I'm not saying be in it. I'm just saying be in the way that you're making sure whoever gets elected is supporting what your goals and ambitions are, and is working to say, hey, I'm going to take a listen to these guys. These are 2 smart young guys working in Baltimore, understand what's going on here. And maybe they got a good piece of advice versus the lady who got elected and put this law on 10 years ago about garbage can lids and has since gone away. And that law is still on the books and those people are still enforcing it. I'm just saying, like, maybe it's a good idea to find out whoever's getting elected and have a conversation with them and then push whoever the person is to the finish line that you can, right? Because who wants to be involved in politics, right?
Yeah, that's a thankless job that I'd rather be out there on the streets, running the business and meeting people. And the politicians they always come in with a certain goal, it seems like, and then their goals quickly change as soon as they get elected and they're in there. Like, we have a new mayor in the city, and he talks a big game and then hasn't done anything to fix any crime issues and putting any more police on the ground or anything like that. It's just like, not for me. Talking to people, I guess, is important, knowing who we are. That's part of the podcast thing too, not just in politics, but in business. One of the reasons we started this podcast was to get our names out there, to interview local investors. Like, we've interviewed a number of people really selfishly. We were asking them questions because we wanted to learn what they were doing. Like, wholesaling is not something I do. I don't wholesale, but we've interviewed two of the biggest wholesalers in Baltimore that, have very successful companies that sell hundreds of homes. Now, they were happy to give all of that information to us. And now we're learning how to wholesale. We're learning operating a wine store. We just, like, all these things. It's cool to be in, talking to these people and learning what they're doing, selfishly, taking those lessons for ourselves.
Well, I think that you're not just taking those lessons for yourselves, but by you asking those questions, you're actually sharing those with people who probably want to know the same exact answer that you're asking, And so, I think that's the whole point of a podcast, like, get everybody that you want to have on, right? And then ask them the questions that you want to know and that the audience will probably want to know as well. I think that's just smart. And I think you guys are smart for doing it. I did want to ask a couple of questions. So with people who are listening to us right now, and they're first trying to get started, they might be scared by what we just talked about with the permits, the politics, and all that jazz. Can we talk about some of the good stuff that's really, like, in terms of, like, how your lives have changed?
Yeah. So I'll touch on what we were talking about earlier, as far as, like, the freedom that it can create, when you're buying and holding these properties. A lot of people, I never wholesale a property. And, a lot of people they suggest starting out as, wholesaling properties. And I guess it's a good way to learn about the transactions, but not necessarily something that you have to start with. The benefit of owning real estate, it creates the freedom, the flexibility. Like, I enjoyed what I do and I enjoy working. And I also enjoy my schedule so flexible that I can go and enjoy lunch, or spend time with my daughter and my family and have that flexibility where I can get up. I have a condo in Ocean City, Maryland, any day or any weekend, we can just say, oh, let's just go here for the weekend and enjoy ourselves. So it's the flexibility. Also creating that cash flow every month, that debt pay down from your tenants, the appreciation and the huge tax benefits that come along with owning rental properties has really helped me tremendously build my wealth.
You couldn't have said it better. I was a teacher for years. I was making just above minimum wage, it seems like. And then year one, I started investing in real estate. I started seeing a couple $1,000s extra a month. I'm like, wow, this is nice. This is almost matching what I'm making teaching, and I have to go to work every day. And then, you build your portfolio up and you start building little businesses around the real estate stuff. And next thing you know, you're doing $5-6 million a year, and you didn't even really know how you got from zero to there. It just kind of happens. And right. for that, it's just like, now, like Nick said, we're planning to go on vacation. We're going to go to some of these real estate conventions and stuff to go meet people. And you can't really do that with a day job. You can't do that when you work for somebody else, and you got to be there. Totally different game. So
with your background as a teacher, Ryan, do you think our school system is teaching people the right things that they need to learn in order to be successful?
No, part of the reason that Nick and I got this together and did this podcast is because I wrote a financial literacy curriculum from A to Z, basic stuff like compound interest, just stupid spending habits, people that smoke cigarettes, people that buy Starbucks, whatever, everything from A to Z, including assets versus liabilities, buying rental properties, what the stock market is, all of these different things. I didn't go into too big a detail with them, but when you see these kids' faces light up, when you tell them what passive income is and that you can collect money not going to work, it's like you're telling them that, bread was sliced for the first time, if you want to get, cliche with it. So the school system's focused on, Abe Lincoln and, the War of 1812 and whatever else they're teaching. But kids don't know how to calculate compound interest. They don't know what it means to invest into an asset versus spend their money on a liability. Those are important things that I didn't get taught, in school. I know they're not teaching them in schools now that I'm working in. So where is that information coming from? It's only coming from wealthy parents, wealthy people passing it to future wealthy people. unfortunately, there's a huge section of society that's really not learning any of this stuff. And basic financial literacy, I think, is the biggest ball dropped by the public school system.
Do you also, Ryan, do you think there's a reason behind that, why they kind of exclude that from the school system?
You know, it's funny when I was teaching this, and I told my principal what I was teaching, because I had to tell her that I wasn't teaching the kids what I'm supposed to be on the curriculum for a couple of weeks. I was teaching them finance stuff. She didn't know about half the stuff. She's a principal of a school. She has multiple master's degrees. She had no idea about investing in rental properties. Teachers are typically, middle to lower class income earners. And a lot of them don't know about this stuff. So much so that, somebody at my school asked me to run a Zoom meeting during COVID when everybody was at home to teach the teachers about investing in real estate and what assets versus liabilities. And these were, 30, 40, 50-year-old people that are asking me, what does passive income mean? How did you buy 20 properties? You're only a teacher. You make $36,000 a year. How do you own that much real estate? And there's these tricks in the Burr method that Nick has crushed and bought $7 million worth of real estate over the last 4 years. We do this and we get wealthy. It's like, this is an easy formula for me to understand. The fact that all these other people don't understand it is, kind of concerning.
Right. So you mentioned compound interest several times. I think that's such a very good place to start right here. And since you're an educator, would you explain to our listening audience what compound interest is, how you calculate it, and then why it's so important to understand?
So I think it's easier to calculate and understand when you do it in the bad way, like what your credit card does for you if you hold a balance. In a good way, essentially, if you invest $1,000 in a bank account, and let's say you're lucky enough to get 1% interest annually, you'll get $100 for that year. After year one, now you're investing $1,100. So your 1% is not just 1% of $1,000, it's 1% of $1,100. Then year two, you're sitting at $1,200 and change. Then your 1% on year two is calculated with that $1,200 and change instead of just that original $1,000 invested. Alternatively, if you have a credit card debt that's happening in the wrong way, and it's a lot bigger of a percent, 20 to 30%, is getting added to your bill. So when you buy a TV and you buy those fancy shoes and another, Xbox or whatever it is that you don't need, you put that on the credit card, you can't pay it off for a year, you're paying an extra 20% on that. If you don't pay it by year one, you're paying 40% on that, and I think that's an easy trap that a lot of people, and as landlords, I know Nick and I go through a lot of credit reports. It is just crazy to see what people put on credit cards and how much debt they're carrying on their credit cards. And it's something that a lot of them will never get caught up with. They'll have to either go bankrupt, they'll have to do some sort of debt consolidation loan. And it's really just a dangerous way to live, financially.
Right. It totally is. It's funny. I've known so many people that have been drowning in credit card debts for years and they don't know how to get out of it. And, they have all these laws for, usury laws, but the credit card companies can charge 29%, 30% interest rates across any state in the USA, but there's only usury laws on what banks can loan in those states, but the credit card companies can run free reign, which I think is, if they talk about people taking advantage of people, that's definitely taking advantage of people, because especially when people don't understand how that interest can really kill you. Like you said earlier, it's like, you make your minimum payment, which is like minimum sounds like, oh, that sounds like a good thing. Let's pay my minimum. Right. And I don't want to pay my maximum. The maximum's a bad word. Right. So people are like, oh, I'll just pay my minimum. And the next thing you know, they're not chopping any wood. It's actually growing. Like you said, their debt is growing versus shrinking. And all of a sudden they're in big time trouble. And like you said, they can't pay their bills. They go to rapid cash places. They do all these silly things because they're doing it out of fear and lack of knowledge, right? And I think that's kind of what you touched on, is that part of the reason that I got into social media, and I think we kind of share the same thing, is, to teach people, because I don't consider myself a smart dude. I got a 1.8 GPA in middle school. My parents strongly considered holding me back. And I'm like, no, I just don't like it. You know what I mean? Like, I want to go do stuff. Right. And so I think that, there's another influencer guy named Meet Kevin that actually ran for the governor of California. And I was really hoping that he would win because he had a really good idea. I wanted to hear what you guys thought about it. So he was talking about, like, just really on this level, because we're young and we care about, the future of our country and everything like that. But he was talking about like these future schools, which is basically not only they're going to teach people about the War of 1812 and, the Spanish Revolution and everything else, but they were going to teach people like, hey, this is how you get ahead. This is how you do this. This is how you can work with your hands. Are you guys having a massive shortage of construction guys out there too?
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's definitely a shortage of people in general that want to work. Unfortunately, in our organization, the people that, are from here, are from this country, typically don't want to work. The people that we've hired, very few of them stick around. So, we're using labor, mostly Hispanic laborers and construction workers, carpenters and stuff like that. And I've, kept up with it, but it is tough. I know Nick probably has a similar issue with just general, there's just a shortage of labor. So even the people that do want to work are just incredibly busy. If you're good, you're busy. If you have a contracting business or you have any kind of skills, if you can lay tile, if you could do electric and you're not busy, then something's wrong.
Yeah. So I when I first started, as I mentioned, when I bought my first property, I was looking for, anyone in the construction field to help me finish or to complete the project. And I finally came across similar situation to you were in. I got a stop work order on my 5th property. And I bought my first one in April, my 2nd and 3rd that October 2018, my 4th in November. I think about my 5th, like early that next year in 2019. And that was the one I got a stop work order on. And the first 4 I bought, I didn't know anything about permits. So when I bought my 5th one, I still didn't know anything about permits. I just heard about it, like make sure that, you cover your windows up make sure you're not bringing in drywall in the middle of the day on a weekday if you're doing, that type of stuff. So that's exactly what happened. At that time, I didn't know. And my guys were carrying in drywall. It was a GC that I hired for this one. My guys were carrying in drywall and we got a stop work order. They sent me a picture. I'm like, what's that? And he's like, it's a stop work order. It was $1,000 fine. And I think a $500 environmental fine for not having permits. So the project, it stopped for like 3 months. And the reason it stopped was because I had to draw the scale of the entire house. And I didn't know anyone to do that. So I did it myself. And I submitted it about 3 times and it got rejected. Like, you have to correct this, this, and this. Submitted it again. It got rejected. Submitted it again. It finally went through. And by that time it went through, I was so happy. I called the GC. I'm like, hey, we're ready to roll. He's like, Nick, we're working on another project now. Call the guy who's the sub for me and see if he'll finish the project for what you owe me. And I'm like, all right. I called the guy and he agreed to finish it for what I owed the GC. And then one day the sub came to me. He's like, Nick, I'm working a full-time job right now, but can you hire me full-time? And in my head, I'm like, I don't know. And then he's like, if you hire me full-time, can you hire me and another guy full-time? And in my head, I'm like, if I don't think I can hire you, what makes you think I can hire you and someone else? So I was like very nervous, but I'm like, you know what? Let's just do it. So I hired them. The main guy is still with me. The other guy, he's not with me anymore. But the main guy, it was 2 of them probably for like 6 months. He's like, we need to hire a 3rd guy. I'm like, all right, let's do it. He's like, I got a friend. Hired a 3rd guy. And then like another year went by. He's like, let's hire a 4th guy. So now, like, as the other guys kind of like floated in and out, and he would just bring in new guys. I have 4 full-time construction workers. And then I have my landscape crew. That's another 4 guys. So I'll have my landscape crew go into houses and do like demo and trash removal, like on the off season, like in the winter time. And then my construction crew will go in and finish the properties. And then I'll call up, the plumbers, HVACs, and the electricians for that type of trade work.
Wow. You guys,
those people sometimes are busy too.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question, something you touched on. You said that most of the guys that you're working with are Hispanic. Would you say, what percentage of the people that you're working with in the construction trades would you say are Hispanic?
I have a project manager that's Hawaiian and Filipino. And I have my dump truck driver is my friend's cousin. And, just a young white guy, graduated from college, wanted to get into real estate. And we have about 30 people total in our organization. Those are the only 2 people that are not Hispanic. My admin assistant, Hispanic women, that culture just is, they're family oriented, they're hardworking people, they're trustworthy, and they all love going to work every day. So we've just found, we've hired multiple different people throughout the years of doing our general contracting property management company. We've just been dissatisfied with almost, everybody. So we stick with, kind of one group of people, and it's typically friends of friends or cousins and brothers of this person and nephews and whatever else. And, it gets the job done. And I know that they're going to be, for the most part, on site working every day.
Right. There's obviously exceptions to every rule on that, but I just was curious, it's one of the things that often I take a look at that. And I noticed one thing about the Hispanic and Latino community is they're very proud of the fact that they work so hard. And I think it's really cool. Like I did a couple videos on TikTok. It was like some silly video where I was like, I'll give you $28,000 if you have it done in 30 days. And everybody's like, he'll have it done in 3 minutes. You know what I mean? They're just like so proud of the fact that they work so hard. And I think that, like you said, very family oriented. Like I've got one of my best crews out here where they literally have their 13-year-old nephew on the jobs on the weekends and he's hanging drywall and stuff. And it's just a culture thing, which I think that, for people who are paying attention, they say, we need to build a wall. I don't mind if they're coming over right now. I need help. You know what I mean? Yeah. I need help.
Yeah. I always joke and say, why don't we ship some of the people that are just feeding on the unemployment fund that we have and ship them back to Mexico, and we'll take in, ones that want to come and work and make the country a better place.
I'm on that plan too with you. So let's talk about new investors. What advice would you give to new investors? I don't see a lot of women getting in the business. I would specifically ask you to answer that for somebody who's a female getting into the business. What advice would you give somebody who's a woman trying to get into real estate investing?
Well, I think one, just in general thing is to find somebody that has like a similar interest in this world, this real estate world that you're in. For me, I found a business partner that was already doing transactions. Like he had some experience with the transactions, with the construction piece. Without him, I probably wouldn't be half of where we are now, because we kind of bounce each other's, goals and mindset off of each other. I always try to get my fiance involved in learning and trying to show her when we're driving around, like, hey, that's our house. Like, that's going to, this is what we own, like getting them involved. And, until you're really addicted to it, like I got and Nick got, like, it's hard because there's so many different pieces to real estate. So I think, finding some piece that you want to do. Is it buy and hold? Is it flip? Is it wholesale? Whatever it is, find something, do the due diligence, talk to people, listen to podcasts, and really just go out and do a deal, get into a safe position financially, find a partner if you have to, and put yourself out there and do a deal. Buying a rental property, $100,000 property with $20,000 down, as long as you have a good risk tolerance, like you can bounce back from that, even if it goes really poorly.
So I would say, it's all about getting the right information. For those out there watching and listening, whatever area you're in, go on Facebook and search real estate groups, in that city that you're in. Join those groups, start to reading through the posts, see what people are posting, see who's engaging in the comments, reach out to those people, ask them questions, reach out to real estate agents in your area, ask them questions, say, hey, look, I'm starting to get involved in real estate investing. Can you give me some help and guidance? That's their job as realtors, is to, help people either find houses, or if it's working with an investor, help investors find properties, just reaching out, maybe attending any type of like real estate investing meetups that may be in your area. I know here in Baltimore and in Maryland, there's a ton of them that you can go to. And I'm sure there are, some in other areas, obviously in other areas of the country. So that's what I would do.
It's good advice. Yeah, for sure. So another question for you. What is the biggest mistake that both of you guys have made so far in your career?
So I'll go first. I just recently had one. I can't get too much into detail because it might end up in a litigation case, but that project I sent you a picture of, we were building a new construction building, 4 units, ground up. We had just a basic contract written with that property. We were on a cost plus 18% basis. So whatever the investor spent, we get an 18% margin on it. Basically, the contract that we wrote is not airtight. I'll just say that, because I got it off a Rocket lawyer. I didn't hire a lawyer. Now I have an attorney that is handling my contract writing, and that was the best money we've ever spent. But yeah, I got strung out for like $160,000 on that specific project, and still owed a significant amount of money. And that was mainly due to poor contract writing from me as a builder to the client that, owned the property. So I guess to date, that's going to be the most expensive mistake that I've made, is just not having that contract piece. And I am the contractor. So if you are an investor that is, hiring contractors, make sure that you guys both have ironclad contracts on both sides. There's just so much money floating around in these construction projects to argue about. that if you don't have it all written down and all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, it gets expensive, especially start hiring attorneys to go collect your money for you. They're taking a chunk for themselves as well.
So I'll give you guys two examples of mistakes that I've made, and hopefully everyone listening can do better to prevent these issues. It's not such a big issue to me now, but my second property I purchased, the ARV came in extremely low, or at least what I thought was very low on the refinance. So when I went to refinance it, I don't remember the exact numbers, but whatever the number was, I had to bring an additional $20,000 just to pay the hard money lender back. And in addition to having to pay closing costs. So I had to come out of pocket $25,000. And this was my second property. So I didn't have a whole lot of capital. So I had to borrow like private money just to get that $25,000 just to close on that refinance. And, in order to avoid that situation, just make sure you're understanding the comps in the area. I thought I knew the comps. Sometimes the appraisers, they don't see a certain comp, or maybe they just have their own opinion on which comps to use. And, you can dispute it. Most of the time, the appraiser will come back and say, I'm not changing anything. Now I know that you can just cancel that appraisal and order another one. Back then, I didn't really know that you could do that. I thought like, this is it. And I just got to suck it up, get the money and close on it and learn from it. The second thing, and this is a big thing, is just hiring cheap contractors, like trying to get the work done as cheap as you can. Never, ever for me has led to anything good. It's always led to more work having to get done, whether it be that they don't finish the project, or they just take your deposit and don't show up, or they finish it and then they finish it incorrectly to where you have to hire someone to come in behind them to correct the issue. In summary, basically just making sure that you are running your comps, understanding what you're putting into that property to get the ARV that you're looking for, and to make sure that you're not hiring the cheapest contractors that you can find.
What's ARV for people who don't know what ARV is?
ARV is after repair value. So ARV is basically after you buy the property, let's say you're doing the BRRRR method where you're buying a distressed house and you're redoing everything in the house. It's what the value of the property going to be once everything is completely done in the property.
ARV always confused me in the beginning. It just basically means market value fixed up, but it's slang for investors. We all talk in code, right? ARV, BRRRR, all this stuff that we talk about. And I think a lot of the time when you're doing something new, half the problem, whether it's, becoming a captain on a boat and learning all that vernacular, is just learning the language of what people are talking about and not being confused. I remember you hear triple net and commercial all the time. And then they talk about cams. And for the first time, I was like, what the hell is a cam? I don't know what a cam is. And it turns out it's just triple net, right? And so you mentioned one thing earlier, Nick, that I really wanted to go back on. And that was that you learned that you could cancel an appraisal. And I think that's a huge tip that you're giving people right now that you maybe kind of just talked about really quickly, but that is huge that you just dropped that gem on us right now. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how you cancel an appraisal and why that's so important and how it can really hang you out to dry if you don't know that knowledge?
Yeah. So basically when you go to refinance a property and, the bank or the lender sends an appraiser out to appraise the property. If the appraisal comes in lower than you think, and you have comps to support that the value should be higher, you can dispute that appraisal. And if the appraiser comes around, turns around and says, I'm not changing it, it is what it is, he'll have his explanation as to why it is what it is. You can just cancel that appraisal. I've canceled it to where I only had to pay a small fee, I think it's like $125 on an appraisal that's like $595, and then reorder a new appraisal and hope that I get an appraiser who sees it in my perspective as far as the comps that I was able to find, and also meeting with the appraiser and just contacting them and saying, hey, do you mind if I email you over some comps to look at? Most of the time they say, yeah, sure, I don't mind. There's been a handful of times where they were like offended by me saying that. So, I mean, I'd rather say it than not say it. But, as I mentioned, there's been times where they said, oh no, well, I can do my job, but the times that I have sent them comps and they allowed it, they typically look at those and tend to use those in their analysis. I
think showing up and being there at the appraisal really, really helps too. When you're there, especially if it's a newly rehabbed property like we do, you say, hey, look, these are quartz countertops. Look, this is a dual HVAC system. There's two 2.5 ton systems here. This roof is brand new. It's got a warranty. every single possible thing that you can point out that's worth money in that property, you should be pointing out to that appraiser.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I used to do, I'd hand them a list, of how much the stuff cost. I just put it right on there with the comps. I'd be like, here's what I came up with. Here's the comps. I don't know if this is going to help you out or not, but here you go. My banker told me to provide this to you, blame it on somebody else so that you don't look like you're being a prick and telling them how to do their job, which I agree with. But I think, both those two pieces of advice are so important because number one, when you meet an appraiser, there's a human element to you now. And that's either a good or a bad thing, because if you're not likable, then he's just going to try to sabotage you. And if you're likable, they're going to try to be helpful, right? One thing that I've been listening a lot to lately is a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Daniel Carnegie. But that's such an old book. And it's so important is like, if you literally just go there and ask the appraiser a bunch of questions, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And you start getting them involved in the actual process into helping you achieve that value, they can make it happen.
Yeah, I have a quick story about that. I met an appraiser over at 9 units. It's 3 triplexes side by side for one of my investors out in California. And I noticed that he had like some sort of shirt on from vacation from Florida or something. And all I did was ask him about, Florida. Well, it turns out that he's like a world traveler. He loves to travel. I got to talking to him. Literally, we walked around these 9 units, and the whole time he was just talking about traveling and just snapping pictures with this old digital camera. We got outside, and he's like, so what do you think these places are worth? And I'm like, I think $350 each would probably be good. I think that's right around where they're going to be at. And he's like, all right, cool. And he literally went home and wrote it up as $350 each. Like, it was, I don't even think he did any of the work that he was supposed to do. I think he literally just took my word for it because we were chatting for 45 minutes to an hour while we were walking through 9 units.
That is huge. I'm glad you told that story. It's 100% true. If you want to get what you want in life, you have to be interested in what other people have to say. And if they're the inspector or the appraiser and you're like, oh, you're just insignificant, you're in my way, but you took the time to have a conversation to notice something that he's wearing. And people all have their things that they're interested in, and they are wearing that. Like you guys probably wear like a nice watch or something else. And if somebody gives you a compliment on that, automatically you're like, hey, I feel special because I bought this watch and it was a big deal for me. And so just by noticing and being sincere with people, it goes a long ways and it gets you what you want, which is most important. I don't think it's being manipulative. I think it's being tactful and tactical, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's those two things. And I think that you guys are smart for doing it. I think you guys are smart for starting a podcast. I had a couple of questions I wanted to follow up with. So, number one, what is the book that you wrote and how do people get it, Ryan?
It's not a book. It's actually like an interactive curriculum where it needs to be taught in order to really be, used. So basically what I was doing is teaching it to groups of students. What my dream is to sell it to the school system so I can teach it to the teachers who then can teach it to the masses. Instead of me just teaching it to 20 or 30 kids at a time, if I taught it to a group of 30 teachers, it would be taught to 20 times 30 kids instead of just one group of 20. So really, within that thing, there are multiple activities where they're learning. I just said, before it cut out, Project Life, I call it, where they have to research what job they want. They have to research the education it takes to get that job. Houses, how much does it cost to rent a place? How much does it cost to buy a place? How much is it to rent a car or buy a car, lease a car? All of these things were just line items in this, project that they had to do. And then they figured out, well, maybe I can't be a teacher if I want to live in this $1.5 million house in South Florida. Or maybe I can't actually drive a Lamborghini because I only make $45,000 a year and my rent is $2,000 a month. And they think, kids, they have no idea what it takes to buy a house, what it takes to, budget or put this together. And I was forcing them basically. They loved being on Zillow and seeing, the property taxes here are lower. And I literally pointed out to them, I was like, yeah, look where we live in, near Annapolis, the property taxes are really high. If you go a little bit outside of the city, they're really low. So that changes your monthly payment. And these are 11, 12-year-olds that are doing this work and they're enamored by it. They love it. So, for me, I was like, if these kids love it, there's other kids that are going to love this and benefit from it as well. And now all of those kids, I've had multiple parents contact me saying, my kid won't stop looking at Zillow. Like, what are you teaching them in school? You're the PE guy. Like that, my kid keeps looking at car payments. And it's something that is really lacking. And I think if I taught the teachers and the school system did eventually buy this platform from me, I could teach it to so many people, the other teachers, once they know it.
So Nick, thank you for sharing that, Ryan. Nick, what is the name of your guys' podcast? How do people follow you guys both on social media? How do they get a hold of you if they want to invest with you? Do you guys bring on investors? Talk about your social media presence and your podcast and how people can get a hold of you.
So the name of the podcast is the Everyday Millionaire Show. My name is Nick Kalfas. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. The Everyday Millionaire Show also has an Instagram as well. You guys can check that out. We're starting to put a lot of content out there, some reels and great podcast episodes.
And as far as we go, I'm Ryan Greenberg, just Ryan Greenberg on Instagram. I think it's Ryan Greenberg 11, but if you search me, I'm public. Facebook, same thing. And as far as my management company, we're always looking for investors. If you're in a market that's, California, New York, Denver, these are all places that we have investors that are bringing money into Baltimore because we can find houses for all in $120,000 that are cash flowing. Where in California, that doesn't exist. So PE Property Management is the name of our company. And we are just basically a turnkey investment company. We take on, investors, hard money lenders, whatever. So reach out via Instagram, Facebook, through our website.
So I'm guessing the name PE came from the job, or is that just me taking a wild guess there?
Tyler, my partner, and I we met in college to be PE teachers. And when we first bought our couple properties, we only had really the intentions of purchasing buy and hold rentals and having passive income. We both thought we were going to be teachers forever and retire with a pension and all that good stuff. Turns out, a few short years later, we're both retiring from teaching now and in a few short days and taking it to the next level. When we first started and we came up with the name, we were like, wouldn't it be funny if one day we were, we had a bunch of real estate and millions of dollars and we had this silly name that was named after us being gym teachers. And, fast forward a couple of years and here we are, doing a couple $1 million a year, having a cool portfolio.
What would be one thing that you would tell somebody who's thinking about getting started today that take them to push them over the fence? Like, there's a breaking point, right? Where you're at your life, you're making your minimum credit card payment. You just don't feel like you can get ahead. You guys obviously are super jacked up about making this move. How do you get someone else jacked up about making the move into real estate?
Basically, just stop being a little bitch. Once you start overthinking things, you talk yourself out of it. You start speaking to too many people and they talk you out of it. You talk to your parents who are the closest to you if you're at a young age and they'll talk you out of it. I would say talk to people who are in a position that you want to be in, not people that are closest to you, because they might not be in that position that you want to be in. And how can they give you advice on something that isn't where you want to go or where you want to be?
My parents, very, conservative people, were very much against me taking the risk and buying all this real estate. They were like, you can't afford that. Like, you don't have enough money. And they didn't understand the whole process. They didn't understand where my mindset was. Like, I will not fail at this because I'm not going to. Just that's it. And if you have that mindset, then you're not going to fail. And even if you do fail at one piece of it, you're going to succeed in another piece. And go talk to people that have done it. Like, I love talking to people that are trying to get into investing. They constantly text me, since we've been putting out these reels on Instagram, people have constantly been hitting us up on Instagram. Like, hey, I'm trying to do this. Like you said, what is one piece of advice? I'm like, well, talk to somebody and do it. Go make a deal. If you need to find a deal, let me send you a couple. You can analyze them. Send me what you came up with. Like, you need to really just talk to other people that are doing it. Because if you talk to Nick or I or any of the people in our network that are doing this, like, we all love it. Whether there's, literally human feces that's flowing into our house because of a broken pipe or 6 inches of water in a basement, we love what we do because all of those are little tiny bumps in the road when it comes to like the grand scheme of it, which is like all of this appreciation, all of this cash flow, all of the freedom. We don't have bosses anymore. We can go do whatever we want. As long as that real estate is still standing, we're free.
That's great. Nick, one thing you mentioned about being a little bitch, did you get that from David Goggins?
No, from Grant Cardone.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, because, I think that's so important. Like, I don't care if it's like real estate, if it's your physical fitness, there's always that soundtrack in your mind that's telling you can't do something. And I think that you're talking to 3 guys here who are just average guys. You said it's the Everyday Millionaire. you guys are kind of trying to point out that we're just average guys, that anybody can do this. And I think that's so important to hammer home, that if you're listening to this podcast right now, number one, give us a 5-star review, because that's super important. Mm-hmm. Make sure you go subscribe to Ryan and Nick's podcast, The Everyday Millionaire. Make sure you follow them on Instagram. Make sure you guys do something to change your trajectory for the next few years, because if you don't do something today, tomorrow's not guaranteed. I mean, I think everybody knows that here. When you're in real estate, I think even more now than ever, you appreciate tomorrow, because you know that, like, when you're working your job, tomorrow sucks. But when you have your own business, you're like, tomorrow is unexpected. I don't know what I'm going to run into, right? And that's cool, versus saying, oh, tomorrow I'm just going to go teach a bunch of kids how to do kickball, right? And I'm going to have like no vote on anything, right? And now it boils down to, like, if you want to decide to pull permits or not pull permits, you're going to make that decision. If you want to decide to replumb the house and figure out if that cast iron's still good, that's your decision, right? All of these things, it's up to you now, versus like having no opinion. I remember my first and last corporate job, I was like, they changed everything on me. I was like the number one sales guy. I'm like, well, you guys need to give me a guarantee or I'm going to leave. And they're like, well, you're not special. I'm like, I outsold everybody here in this whole situation. I am special. They're like, no, you're not. And so that was the end of it for me. So that's why I said, when you're on the fence, you got to listen to what Nick and Ryan says and say, I'm going to change my trajectory, and I'm going to hit the subscribe button, number one. And then I'm going to get started investing in real estate, whether it's making a goal and driving for dollars or whatever the situation is, get started doing it today. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Offer to help people. If you have a successful real estate investor in your network that or somebody, a friend or a friend of a friend, offer to help them, offer to ride along with them and do something to learn from them. There's so many different niches and ways that you can get involved in real estate that, if you really want to do it and you have the drive to do it, there's nothing that should be stopping you.
Sweet. Guys, I really appreciate it. Thank you for giving us your time today. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you give us a 5-star review. Make sure you share this podcast with a friend. Make sure if you're out in Baltimore that you guys go check out what Nick and Ryan are doing, and make sure that you guys buy one of these cheap houses in Baltimore. I know I'm super interested about investing in that market. I'm super excited to meet you guys when I do make it out there.
Yeah, Troy, let us know when you're ready to come out. We'll spend a day driving around.
All right, man. Peace.